a little bit about jokes, right? Like, so when you're thinking about how to create a joke, like, give me a good anatomy. Like, and I feel like the reason why I'm asking this question is because, like, even if someone's not going to tell a joke, right? I think there's ways to, create situations of irony, right? So that they can be better communicators, right? Or better storytellers. So talk to me a little bit about the anatomy of what you think a great joke is.
Yeah, I would say the, for the most part is misdirection. And I know a lot of comedians like uh, compare that to being like a magician. Like you're basically setting up a thing and then pulling that expectation away. So you always have to have a punchline. That is the most important part, I would say. Having the anatomy of basically what we would call the setup. So you would have a thing like, I don't know, all eggs around, and then your punchline would basically to subvert the setup. And you can do that in multiple ways. You know, all eggs around, except if you're a square chicken or something like that,
Right, right, right.
something stupid. Um, so that's like the most simple anatomy of it is what you call it, the premise, the setup, and then the punchline. The premise is like what is the idea of the joke. The setup is how you would convey the idea, and then the final part would be and how you're going to subvert it. That would be the most traditional way. Um, the other ways are a very traditional writing style or any kind of communication style is like the rule of threes. So basically, you go one, two, subvert, or you go ridiculous, ridiculous, normal, or more commonly normal, normal, ridiculous. So I really hate it when my girlfriend calls, my mom calls, and my boyfriend calls. Right? It'd be like something stupid to basically like subvert the the 1, 2, 3. Uh, those that would be like probably the second best way to analogize like the anatomy of a joke. And I think one of the most important things is the punchline is what should carry the meaning. So I think a lot of folks conflate the punchline with the vehicle, which is basically the premise and the setup. So I think that's kind of where a lot of comedians get in hot water. Their premise and their setup uses a controversial vehicle, but then their punchline is perfectly fine. It's just the time to get there to the punchline gets lost, and then someone gets stuck in between. In which case, then you're like, "Oh no, please hear me out, or
Oh, you got to
did
explain.
you hear me?"
You got to explain it,
Yeah,
or you got to expand upon the joke. But it's just like you have to climb an uphill battle, right? Because the audience is already deflated, and then you have to kind of figure out how to roll that in to something else. So that I'm guessing, like, if the whole thing was, the premise, like now you have to use the 1, 2, 3 as the premise, and then lead that into another, sort of subversion. So it's just like you're just
yeah,
regrouping that and reframing it again. And I can imagine to do that on the spot is very, very difficult.
yeah. I mean, I just told you a really shitty joke about square eggs, so this is the benchmark.
I mean, do you feel that, like, though, comedians use very convenient truths, right, to help bridge things a little bit? Like, you're talking about, for example, like round eggs, square chicken. Maybe it's, I don't know, triangular hen or something like that, or triangular scrambled eggs or something like that, right? Like, not that they're all related, but you're trying to find, a pattern that's like, if you expand or exaggerate the definition, it's truth, right? Or if you just, like, for example, we are using parts of a chicken and you were also introducing new shapes, right? So it's just like you just have to find those parallels that sort of match that. And that's the irony, like, that you can kind of get away with when, let's say, if you are struggling with a joke, it's just like, oh, I have these two things in mind. How do I just stay on theme?
Yeah, that that is a lot of what we do. And I just thought about another one, and you could say all these eggs around, but only if the chicken's sticking inside the box or something.
That's a farm to table
Yeah,
joke.
and yeah, yeah, no, for sure for that. And I rely on that heavily, to be honest. And I think a lot of good comedy does. because I think a lot of good comedy does rely on a common understanding. So if I have to spell everything out to you, then it's like half a lecture. Then you're like, f that. Because I've tried to do that before. I have tried to do jokes on econ because I studied econ in undergrad. I was like, I'm gonna make my degree worth it. And I went out to open mics and I'd be like, these economic jokes. And people are like, dude, what?
You
I
must
don't
have
care
really
about
liked
inflation.
the speakeasy one from Ronnie Chang, because
I did.
I think he mentions like the central limit theorem, obviously econ joke, and I thought it was like, wow, I never thought I'd hear that in a stand up comedy venue before.
I laughed so hard when he said that. Yeah, and he was like, "Yo, the p values are too big." And I was like, that was great. That was honestly great. And
uh,
that was a double layered one too, because he was talking about penises.
That's hilarious. One thing I found out was that Nigel Ung, he was actually a data scientist before he became Uncle Roger.
Oh,
So it must be
dang.
there's got to be something about being Asian and then being either something that has to do with money. I don't know, like being an accountant. I don't know, or something with science, right? Just basically whatever your parents told you to be, a doctor, lawyer, or an accountant, right? Feel like there's a lot of angst that's being taken away, from that, and that just becomes the butt of a lot of Asian jokes. Like, when Simu was doing all the stock footage stuff, he was just like, "Yeah, I was actually an accountant." So obviously, well, I'm kind of paraphrasing now, or just interjecting my own opinion. Just like, yeah, he knows how to play an accountant because he was one. So if you're in a stock photo, it's like, what it's like to be, I mean, obviously he's embellishing, what accountants look like, in a bright, kind of airy sort of settings, because that accountants usually kind of get the corner venue because they just look at numbers and spreadsheets all day. And
Yeah,
when it's tax season, they're stuck in a hole, right, 24/7 for like 7 days a week.
I think yeah. Some of the funniest folks I've met are like repressed professionals. I would say. And I would like say yeah. Shout out to that like second city class I was in, because they were all really funny, and it like what you were saying, a lot of them were very educated professionals, and I think there's like a correlation to that, right? It's like the more educated you are, the better you are with language, and I think that does play a part in it, because there was like a journalist in my first class, and she was killer. Like
Cool.
she was just so good with the words.
I can imagine, just because like she could exaggerate the meanings, right? Or like she could play it straight, or she could stretch it out to fit whatever nuance that she needed.
Yeah. I would say like if you're a working professional, don't think that means that you're like a boring person. It probably means you're very not boring because you're so repressed.